I have to apologize up front. I think I got the gist of a lot of what you said, but there's a bad language barrier from your accent plus the low quality microphone, so it's actually very difficult to understand a lot of what you're saying. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, but I'm just letting you know that that's creating an actual issue of understanding what you're talking about. But I'm going to take a crack at it anyway. So basically, this is just another antinatalist communist. It's like a TikToker on steroids. My opponent, his essential view is just this: babies can't consent to being born, so you have no right to have them because this life promises suffering and fear, and it's better not to exist and not to suffer rather than to exist and to suffer. It's pretty simple. Of course, the easy thing here, which pops into everybody's mind, is, well, then why the fuck don't you just delete yourself and therefore experience no more suffering? That's the obvious question. Of course, antinatalists have a refutation of this. They say, and it's pretty amusing, they say, well, it's because they're biologically wired to fear death, so they're too unafraid to unalive themselves, which is fucking hilarious because every day firefighters, military personnel, and all sorts of individuals do things they're terrified of doing. In fact, even mothers are in some capacity putting their lives on the line to have kids, which means basically everybody's moral convictions are better than the antinatalists, because antinatalists are essentially just pussies, right? They don't actually live by their own convictions and everybody else does, which is hilarious. Imagine that a firefighter will run into a building to save a kid from death, thus fulfilling the conviction of his belief. And these sissies whine all day about how scared they are to die, thus fulfilling the belief about experience. It's fucking hilarious, which proves that their worldview is a big hoax. But let's get to the argument after we have exposed this as being a sham. Reduce, his argument is an old one. It's a very classic one. I know exactly where he got it from. It just goes like this. Premise 1, we should not harm people unnecessarily. Premise 2, life entails harm. Premise 3, bringing people into existence is not necessary. Therefore, we should not bring people into existence. It's pretty simple. I have two arguments here. The first is to point out the stupidity of this argument by mirroring it. So my argument would be premise 1, I derive maximum pleasure from oppressing women. Premise 2, effectively oppressing women requires women to exist. And premise 3, bringing women into existence is not necessary. Therefore, we should bring more women into existence. Both arguments hinge on the word necessary, as though these are universal claims instead of just preferences. It's a great smuggle. If it's his preference that we shouldn't do unnecessary things based around harm, it's my preference that we should, as long as it's based around my personal fucking pleasure. It's the same argument both ways.
Pinky, are you watching this, or has your brain finally filed for asylum? Observe the opening maneuver. I couldn't understand him, but I will confidently summarize him anyway. A breathtaking display of intellectual courage. It's like announcing you're illiterate and then volunteering to review a novel. If you cannot hear the argument, you don't get to reconstruct it from vibes and testosterone. That's not debate. That's fan fiction. Then he immediately reaches for the classic emergency lever. Label, dismiss, move on. Antinatalist communist, TikToker on steroids. Translation: I am not prepared to engage, so I will decorate my confusion with insults and hope nobody notices. It's the rhetorical equivalent of jangling keys in front of a distracted audience. Now, the centerpiece of his confusion, the little gem he thinks is devastating. If suffering is bad, why don't you just kill yourself? Pinky, this is not a counter-argument. This is a category error wearing a Halloween costume. Antinatalism is about creating victims, not disposing of existing ones. Those are not the same action. One introduces harm where there was none. The other attempts to escape harm that already exists. Conflating them is like saying, if you think arson is wrong, why don't you burn down your own house? Because, dear Andrew, the entire point is not to start fires in the first place. He thinks he's caught a contradiction. What he's actually done is confuse preventing harm with escaping harm, which is the philosophical equivalent of tripping over your own shoelaces and declaring victory over gravity. Then we get the heroic comparison. Firefighters, soldiers, mothers. Pinky, I want you to savor this. He believes the existence of people who risk their lives proves that fear of death is irrelevant. That is, astonishingly retarded. The existence of bravery presupposes fear. You cannot be brave without something to be afraid of. A firefighter running into a burning building does not prove humans aren't wired to avoid death. It proves that occasionally they override that wiring under extreme conditions. And notice the sleight of hand. Firefighters run into fires to save already existing people from harm. Antinatalists are talking about not creating new people who will need saving in the first place. He has compared emergency response to procreation like they're part of the same moral category. That's like comparing a hospital to a factory that produces patients. Then comes the insult phase. They don't live by their convictions. No, Andrew, they do. They refrain from creating new sufferers. That's the action. That's the conviction. You just don't like that it doesn't involve dramatic self-immolation for your viewing pleasure. You want them to die to prove they dislike suffering. That's not consistency. That's spectacle. Now, his attempt at mirroring the argument. This is where it becomes performance art. He says essentially, my pleasure in oppressing women justifies bringing women into existence. Pinky, he thinks this is equivalent. It's not even wrong in an interesting way. It's just structurally incoherent. The original argument is built on a widely accepted moral premise. Unnecessary harm is bad. He replaces that with, my personal pleasure justifies harm. That's not a mirror. That's abandoning morality and calling it symmetry. Of course, you can generate parallel arguments if you swap out ethics for narcissism. You can justify anything that way. I enjoy setting puppies on fire, therefore puppies should exist. Congratulations! You've discovered that if you remove moral constraints, morality stops constraining things. Groundbreaking work. The word necessary is not a smuggle. It's doing actual work. It distinguishes between harms we tolerate because they are unavoidable and harms we introduce for no reason. Life contains harm. Creating life introduces harm that did not have to occur. That's the distinction. It's not a preference. It's a moral filter. Andrew's counter is, what if I prefer harm? Yes. That's called being morally indefensible. You don't get points for admitting it loudly. So let's summarize his opening, Pinky. He couldn't understand the argument. He misrepresented the argument. He attacked a position nobody holds. He confused bravery with the absence of fear. He compared rescue to reproduction. And then he tried to refute an ethical framework by replacing it with, I like hurting people. If this is the opening salvo, I'm almost concerned for the rest of his case. Almost. Because somewhere, buried under all that noise, is a very simple truth he cannot seem to touch. Not creating harm is easier than justifying it. And that, Pinky, is the one move he cannot counter, no matter how loudly he shouts about firefighters.
Second, I will introduce the destroyer of antinatalist ideology. I call it Wilson's maxim. Wilson's maxim just states this. If it is true that the cowardly antinatalist actually wants to reduce humanity to zero for the purpose of eliminating suffering, then here is my argument for it. Premise 1. Every generation creates more dangerous technology to humanity than the generation before it. Nukes, bioweapons, AI, whatever comes next, the existential risk escalates with each cohort of inventors. The fastest way to accelerate that dangerous technology is to maximize the number of people, and therefore the number of geniuses, tinkers, and mad scientists that the Earth's resources can sustainably support. Antinatalists ultimately want humanity to cease existing forever. Zero future people equals zero future harm. Therefore, the most effective way to achieve the antinatalist goal is to have as many children as possible right now to crank out the biggest population boom that resources will allow in order to speed run the tech explosion and guarantee self-extinction sooner rather than later. So even if I was super charitable to my opponent's argument, he should actually be a pro-natalist and pro having as many children as possible to get as many minds on planet Earth as possible so we can destroy ourselves. So it's an incoherent ideology, always has been, and I'm happy to dive into it. And with that, I'm ready to go.
Pinky, he's trying to name a theorem after himself while actively disproving it mid-fucking sentence. It's like watching a child build a monument out of wet cardboard and then brag about its permanence. Strip the noise. His maxim is this. More people leads to more tech leads to higher risk leads to faster extinction, leads to therefore antinatalists should want more people. That is not an argument. That's a confused chain where every arrow is doing imaginary work. He's treating risk like it guarantees outcome. More people increases variance. It does not deterministically produce extinction. By his own logic, more people also means more mitigation, more coordination, more safety systems. He cherry-picks one branch of the probability tree and declares it fucking destiny. And then the fatal mistake, he thinks antinatalism is fundamentally about achieving extinction. That's sloppy. Some antinatalists do, in fact, endorse extinction as a long-term outcome. Others don't frame it that way at all. What unifies them is much simpler and far less dramatic. Don't create new sufferers. Extinction, when it shows up, is a downstream consequence of that principle being widely followed. It is not the operational rule itself. Those are not equivalent. One is a direct local constraint on action. You, personally, don't impose life and its harms on someone else. The other is a global end state that may or may not occur depending on how widely that constraint is adopted. Wilson collapses that distinction because he needs antinatalism to be a coordinated extinction project for his argument to even get off the ground. Without that, his whole breed more to die faster routine has nothing to hook into. So he isn't just arguing against a position that doesn't exist, he's taking a minority framing, inflating it into the whole ideology, and then attacking a goddamn cartoon version of it, which is convenient, because engaging with the actual claim, don't create unnecessary harm, would require him to do something he's been aggressively avoiding so far. Think. So his solution becomes grotesque on contact with reality. Create as many people as possible now to maybe end suffering sooner. Translation, deliberately manufacture maximum suffering now for a hypothetical future payoff that is neither guaranteed nor controlled. That's not a reductio of antinatalism. That's a confession that his framework permits mass fucking harm if you wrap it in a distant greater good. Congratulations, he's reinvented every catastrophic ideology in history and thinks it's a clever reversal. Also notice the quiet self-own. If more people accelerates existential risk, then pro-natalism is literally increasing the odds of annihilation. He just argued his own position is playing roulette with extinction, then tried to spin it as a win. The core failure is simple and terminal. He replaces, "Don't introduce unnecessary harm," with, "Introduce massive harm now to maybe eliminate it later." Those are not mirrors. One is restraint, the other is reckless escalation dressed up as a retarded strategy. His maxim collapses because it depends on three false moves, treating probability as inevitability, recasting a harm avoidance principle as an extinction strategy, justifying present harm with speculative future relief. Remove any one of those and the whole goddamn thing implodes. He managed all three at once, efficient in a tragic sort of way. So no, it doesn't show incoherence. It shows he cannot distinguish between preventing harm at the source and rolling the dice on catastrophe to clean it up later, which, to be fair, is a very human error. Just not one you build a maxim on unless you enjoy watching it evaporate under 5 seconds of scrutiny.